I was walking home from Susan's house, thinking about what Terry had told me, when the squad car pulled up next to me. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the nose of the cruiser, but only until I remembered what Terry had told me about the sheriff. I had thought someone had been following me for a while, and I had been worried that it would turn out to be a creep or something. The sight of the cop car should have filled me with relief, but it made me more than a little nervous as the eyes of the driver turned to me. I thought maybe they were just checking on a call or something, but when the driver rolled the window down, I saw that it wasn't just any patrolman. The sheriff hadn't changed much in the time I'd been gone, though it appeared he had lost a little more hair and added a few more wrinkles. He had congratulated me on my heroism when I came back, shaking my hand as I stood between he and the mayor, receiving my placard. That being said, I think even as a kid I had recognized that his good-natured smiles never went all the way to his eyes. He was calculating, and you could see it working on him, even as he grinned at me through the window of his car. "Where you heading?" "Just heading home, Sheriff," I answered, trying not to sound guilty and mostly just sounding unsure of myself. "Why don't I give you a ride?" he offered, reaching over to open the passenger side door. The offer was tempting, but I honestly didn't want to be stuck in a car with Sheriff Mackenzie. Not if I could help it. "That's okay," I said, as I tried to keep the apprehension out of my voice. "It's not far, and I like to stay in shape." As I took another couple of steps, he pulled the car up alongside me, the smile deteriorating ever so slightly. "You're right. It's not that far, and I just want to see how you're settling into civilian life. Come on, let an old one-horse town sheriff live vicariously through a great war hero for a minute." I remembered what I'd been thinking earlier, about how the sheriff might be dangerous, and decided that it might be for the best to just accept the ride. He wasn't going to kill me on the street. He had no reason to. Wasn't doing anything wrong. Hadn't been doing anything wrong. And the idea that he might hurt me was stupid. I was a local celebrity, someone who could handle myself if he decided to get violent, and we both knew it. Even so, it was hard to forget what Terry had told me about the sheriff and the mayor, that they seemed to have all the power these days. The only other thing in town that seemed to have power were the foresters, and I was way less afraid of some small-town lawman than the creatures that snatched the town's children. I climbed into the cruiser and tried to look comfortable as we drove towards my house. "So how you adjusting? Picking up where you left off?" "I suppose so," I told him. This was a strange line of questioning, especially considering we had never interacted before I got back from Iraq. I'd seen him at assembly sometimes when I was in high school, or coming to talk to the principal about some hell-raising that had gone on the night before, but I think this was probably the first conversation I'd ever had with Jerry Mackenzie. "We haven't seen you at the local events lately. We were worried that maybe you were having some trouble coming back to civilian life. It's not good for the town morale when a local legend is having trouble fitting in." "I've just been busy," I told him, almost absent-mindedly. "Working for Camber and Son, being in the woods 5 days a week, trying to get back to life. I barely started before I left." Mackenzie smiled knowingly. "I say we were worried, right up until we noticed you were hanging around the bookstore owned by your old flame. She's a good-looking girl. You should feel very lucky." That got my neck hair up a little bit. Had they been watching me? Why had they been watching me? I was, as far as any of them knew, a hometown hero. What reason did I have to be under surveillance by the sheriff of Rayffered? It all smacked of something a little sinister, and I didn't like it. "Seems like you've been getting cozy with the Brenham family," he said, almost too low for me to hear. "Sorry?" I said, turning to give him my full attention as he spun the wheel lazily. "We see you running errands with our Uncle Terry. That is company you might want to be careful around." I opened my mouth to say more, but he drove past the road that would have taken him to my house, and I watched it disappear with a sense of dread. "Hey, you missed my turnoff, Sheriff." "Did I?" he asked lazily, flashing me a smile. "Oh, well, there's someone else that wants to have a word with you anyway. A very important person has asked me to facilitate a meeting between the two of you, and he's not the kind of man you say no to when he wants something." I wanted to argue, but there wasn't really much I could say. I tried the door and found that it was locked. I didn't want to cause a scene by trying to jump out of his car in the middle of traffic, not being sure I could unlock the door in his cruiser anyway. I went along for the ride, figuring I'd learn soon enough who wanted my attention. Mackenzie took a few roads seemingly at random, and as we pulled into the nicer part of town, I was unsurprised when we came to rest outside the mayor's house. Mayor Register had one of the largest houses amongst the 5 or 6 in that subdivision. It wasn't a mansion, not really, but it likely had about twice as many rooms and 3 times as much square footage as my parents' house hosted. I was sure there was a swimming pool in the backyard, an amenity that very few had around here, since the forest seemed to send its roots searching everywhere. As I climbed out of the cruiser, I thought about running. It wasn't like he was going to shoot me in the street, but then I remembered what Terry had said about people the mayor thought were interfering with the forest and its denizens. The foresters aren't the only ones who make people disappear in this town. "Come on," Sheriff Mackenzie said, as if guessing what I was thinking. "The mayor just wants a quick word. I promise we'll have you home before sundown." As little as I wanted to, I went with him into the mayor's palatial home. We came in through a foyer that looked bigger than my barracks at Basic and walked through a sitting room that led to a kitchen that led out to the backyard. The kitchen had amenities in it that I'd never seen before, and the whole thing looked like the galley on a spaceship. There was indeed a pool in the backyard, and sitting at one of the little tables poolside was Mayor Register. He was wearing part of his usual steel blue suit. The coat hung across the back of the chair he now occupied, and his white shirt seemed to cover his small frame like a funeral shroud. He had shrunk some in the time I had been gone, his age finally catching up with him, and he didn't look well. His skin kind of hung on him, the color looking off, and I suspected that he might be wearing a toupee. He looked up as we came to the side of the pool, waving us over as he took a drink of something from a large glass. I thought it might have been beer, but as I got closer, I noticed that it was thick and not altogether healthy looking. "Want one?" the mayor asked, seeing me looking at the glass. "It's a health shake from somewhere overseas. Tastes terrible, but it's as good as a meal, and it's supposed to stave off cancer and all sorts of things. Haven't got it yet, so maybe it works." I told him I would pass and took a seat in the chair across from him. Sheriff Mackenzie loomed on my left shoulder, and I got the suspicion that he was preparing to intercede if needed. What was he afraid I was going to do exactly? Did he think I was going to kill the mayor for inviting me over for a drink? The whole thing seemed even stranger the longer it went on, and I almost felt like I should have a hat in my hand as I met with this Mayor Don. "We were just curious to see how you were getting along," the mayor said as he took another sip from his glass and grimaced. "When I came back from college, it was so difficult to return to the normal humdrum life of Rayffered. Once you've been out of town, it all just seems so small, and you've been farther than most. I would have preferred to meet with you in my office, but it appears you're a hard man to track down these days." He looked at me over the rim of his glass, trying for a playful disapproval, but coming off as somewhat daffy. "I mean," I said, feeling like I needed to make explanations for my busy schedule, "I've been in the woods most days, working for Camber & Son. Otherwise, I'm just enjoying my downtime, trying to get back into civilian life." "And the civilians you left behind," Sheriff Mackenzie said dryly. "Don't be crass, Jerry," Mayor Register said. "We had noticed you spending a lot of time with old friends, maybe making some new ones." He took another long sip from the glass, and When he looked up, all the goodwill was gone. "What can you tell me about Terry Bremen and his latest writing project?" he asked, his tone sounding less playful than it had before. "You would know better than I would. He sits on the council with you and the sheriff, doesn't he?" The mayor steepled his fingers before his eyes, a distinctly wizardly-looking gesture. "If I can be honest with you, Terry hasn't been himself for the last couple of years. Since his wife died, he's been very distant, and he's been talking to people that I would rather he not talk to. He's been working on books for the last 3 years. Do you know that? One of them he started before his wife died, but the other one is a ledger about those who have been lost to the foresters. I've asked him several times why he feels he needs to write such a book, and every time he tells me the same thing. It's to honor the dead, and the dead should be honored for their sacrifice. Maybe you agree with him. I know you lost a brother to the foresters, but if a book like that ever got out, people might start looking at Rayffered in a different light. No one believes the crackpots that try to tell stories about forest people that steal children after dark. We live in the new world, and no one believes in boogeymen anymore. No one except your friend, Terry." "If you want him to stop writing the book," I said, unable to keep the chill out of my voice, "then why don't you just ask him yourself? It's within your power to tell him not to write about town history, I would assume." I heard Sheriff Mackenzie move in an agitated way, but Mayor Register put a hand up, stopping him from doing anything unwise. The man was still smiling, but I noticed it never went to his eyes. His eyes were cold and flinty, like the rock that they dug out of the quarry, and I realized Terry might have been justified in his fears about this man and his lackey, and what they could be doing. So far, Terry hasn't broken any rules. He's a member in good standing of the Historical Society, and as such, is well within his rights to write about history. I just think someone might give him some good advice when it comes to doing things that might end badly for him. No one wants to see an end to what we have here. Forest gives us everything we need, and it keeps your father and the company he works for employed. Keeps your friends at the logging company employed. It even keeps you in funds. It'd be a real shame if something put it all to an end and ruined it for everyone else. Don't you think? I spoke before I could think better of it. And those kids that they take to the forest, what are they? A reasonable loss so the good times continue to roll? The mayor shrugged, and that was all the answer I needed. We all feel terrible about the people that go missing, but what's the alternative? Mayors before me have tried to fight back, and it never does any good. Would you rather that the foresters come and take the whole town? No, this is better. We lose a few people, but the gains keep the town alive. Besides, they never take more than they need. I wanted to tell him that was a lie, but it made me think of something I hadn't before. Was there a set amount that they took? Some constant in their theft? I'd always assumed they just took what they wanted, but maybe there was a number, a quota, an end. The mayor drained the cup in a single pull, shuddering as he fought to keep it down. He flapped a hand at me, clearly done with the meeting, and suddenly Sheriff Mackenzie had a hand on my shoulder, and I was being escorted out. It appeared we were done here, but when he raised his voice as I was being frog-marched around the pool, we both stopped. "Oh, before you go, I would consider it your civic duty to report on anything Terry Bremen might be doing that would endanger the town. Otherwise, we might decide you are an accomplice, and that wouldn't be great for your status as a town celebrity. The winds can change at a moment's notice in Rayffered. Be sure you're catching the tailwind instead of being plummeted to the earth." The ride to my parents' house was extremely awkward, but as the sheriff's car rounded the corner, I was already off and running. Sundown was still hours away, and I needed to let Terry know what I had learned. It appeared his paranoia wasn't unfounded. You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story, or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad, Unicorn Hollow, and Army Dude for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Janet, Lee Kendall, Saikat, Ronda J, Sue Casper, and Valinator for being our spooky skeleton contributors. And thanks to Oh Snap, Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Stephanie Carrington, Tyler Parker, Cinnamon Fox, Grim Reaper, TomBoiTopUwU, and Queen Sheebah for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. And a big thanks to Scott Donahue for being our ghostly writer tier contributor. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you'd like to support the channel, then come on down to Patreon or become a member on YouTube. Spooky Skeleton tier contributors, that's our $5 tier, get their spooky 12 hours early at 8:30 a.m. as opposed to 8:30 p.m. My time, of course. And while Ghostly Reading is only a tier that's available on Patreon, you get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one on your doorstep in, hopefully, a timely manner. If you'd like a book, we have many on Amazon. I've got links below if you'd like to follow those. Should get you to my page so you can buy any one of my 8 books I believe we're up to now. I'm sure they'd look really nice on your shelf, and I'll sign them for you if you can find me out in the wild. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.